Judge Thad Balkman has issued a $572 million verdict against Johnson & Johnson and its subsidiaries. I'm Dave Morris here in the Oklahoman's newsroom alongside my colleagues Chris Casteel and Randy Ellis. And earlier today we were there in Cleveland County Courthouse as the judge issued his verdict. Randy, I'll start with you. The judge agreed with the state that Johnson & Johnson had created a public nuisance, which we'll get into with Chris here in a little bit, but not to the tune of the $17 billion they were asking for.
No, he didn't. The state was saying that the public nuisance occurred over 20 or 30 years and were seeking funding for all those years. The judge ruled they had proved their case for the first year and awarded the money for the first year, but didn't award the money for the other years. So you'd have to say it's at least a partial victory for the state, but whether it's a complete victory or not, just fell shy of that.
The opioid crisis is an imminent danger and menace to Oklahomans. My judgment includes findings of fact and conclusions of law that the state met its burden, that the defendants, Janssen and Johnson & Johnson's misleading marketing and promotion of opioids created a nuisance as defined by 50 OS Section 1. I am entering an abatement plan that consists of costs totaling $572,102,028 to immediately remediate the nuisance. As I detail in my judgment, this is the amount of costs that I am constrained to order Janssen and Johnson & Johnson to pay based on the particulars of a nuisance claim and the evidence that was presented at trial. Whether additional programs and funding are needed over an extended period of time, those are determinations to be made by our legislators and policymakers.
Chris, this is a story you're reporting on in upcoming editions of the Oklahoman. Oklahoma's use of the public nuisance law is a bit unique.
It was, and they made that decision, Dave, about 6 weeks, I think, before the trial started. They were going to drop all of the other complaints, including fraud, and just focus on this law where they had to prove that the actions of Johnson & Johnson and its subsidiaries created a public nuisance that the company now needed to abate. It's never been used, according to Johnson & Johnson's attorneys, never been used this way in Oklahoma in 100 years of Oklahoma law. And it's almost exclusively been used in property disputes, never for this kind of commercial and regulated business of selling drugs. And that's going to be, sounds like the main grounds for their appeal. And what they said was because that we were forced to kind of defend ourselves in this case against in a law that's never been used in this way, it denied us our due process rights.
It's a question that you asked Attorney General Mike Hunter and Sabrina Strong. She was representing Johnson & Johnson. Take a look at those sound bites.
In our judgment, the best way to proceed, the complexity of the other claims in our case, we evaluated carefully. We also, again, we're looking towards what do we need to do to address not only the present but the future. And so as we looked at public nuisance law, it was clear to us that was the best way to maximize any kind of a judgment that we were able to obtain in court here. And so, no looking back, we made the right decision. I'm confident, Chris. Thanks.
There are many constitutional issues, including due process of law. The fact that Oklahoma has never utilized public nuisance law in this way before, that it has never been applied outside of the property context, that it has never been applied to commercial activity before, that is a fundamental due process concern. The fact that the judge believes that it's appropriate to hold a company who had less than 1% of the market responsible for the entirety of the opioid abuse crisis, including illicitly manufactured drugs imported into this country by drug traffickers, that's a fundamental due process problem, as just a couple examples.
All right, so the verdict was the first major lawsuit against opioid manufacturers. Investors were watching this as well here today. They were expecting, according to reports, that verdict to come back somewhere in the neighborhood of $500 million up to $5 billion. And so after post-market trading for Johnson & Johnson, up about 2%. Chris alluded to appeal process. Randy, what happens next?
Yeah, they're going to the Supreme Court with it. They made it real clear, real fast that's where they're headed. It was also asked whether if they lost at that level, they would take it to federal court. They try and go to the U.S. Supreme Court, and they indicated that they would, although they wanted to not get too far ahead of themselves.
All right, you can watch the ruling, Judge Thad Balkman, online at Oklahoman.com. You can also watch statements from the state and from the defense online at Oklahoman.com. Chris Landsberger was there providing pool photography. Check out his snapshots online as well. Gentlemen, thank you for your time today. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Dave.